Do you have an old computer? Are you tight on a budget? Do you need it to perform better than it currently does? Are your friends laughing at you because your computer will take over 2 minutes to turn on? Well, we have the solution for you. You need more RAM. Go to downloadmoreram.com and just download as much as you want and that'll fix your computer. Kidding. Jokes aside, we're gonna take this computer that was my brother's middle school laptop, which is over 7 years old, and we're gonna try to see if we can make it perform as well as most mid-range computers today. Currently, this computer has two 1GB RAM sticks and a 500GB HDD. That is very, very slow. So I went on Amazon, I bought two 8GB of RAM sticks and a 240GB SSD. We're gonna see if this cheap $150 upgrade will make this computer perform as well as most mid-grade computers. So that way you only have to spend $150 to get crazy performance. When we first boot up this laptop without anything being modified, it took over 2 minutes and 20 seconds just for me to load into the home screen. That's a long time. That's very slow. The good thing about old computers is it's very easy to upgrade. We're gonna grab our handy dandy IKEA toolkit, find the correct bit, and undo the screws. It's that simple. So we're gonna do 3 tests. We showed you how long it takes with just the computer as is. Next, we're gonna upgrade the RAM because a lot of people think that upgrading the RAM will give you the best performance. But we're gonna find out if that's actually true. And then we'll do a test where we upgrade the SSD, and then we'll do a test where we upgrade both the RAM and the SSD. We're gonna take the battery out because it makes it a little bit easier to pop the cover. Alright, and right here we have our two 1GB of RAM sticks. We just need to open the sides and it comes right out. And then we just pop the sides and the RAM will just stick out. And we're just gonna slide this in the same way. Line up the pins. Apply a little bit of pressure. And just push it down. And there we go. That's 8 gigs and we're gonna add 8 more gigs. Sometimes you need to add a little bit of pressure because it won't go in right away. After upgrading to 16 gigs of RAM, we saw the computer took 1 minute and 5 seconds to go to the home screen. This is under half the time from the 2GB of RAM we had originally, so it's quite a significant improvement. Even though we reduced the time it took to boot up Windows by half, upgrading the RAM alone wasn't enough for us to actually make it compete with most modern day laptops. So our next test will be to remove the current hard drive, which is an HDD, a hard disk drive, and replace it with an SSD and see if that will at least get us close to what modern day computers can do. Removing the hard drive from this machine was very simple. All I had to do was lift up the back and unplug the connection. Connecting the new drive was just as simple. All I had to do was line up the pins and plug it in. There was one small issue. The SSD was a little too thin to occupy the space that was used by the HDD. After installing the SSD, I went back and reinstalled the two 1GB RAM sticks. This way we can test if just upgrading the SSD alone would give us a big improvement. Now it takes about 1 minute and 35 seconds to boot up the computer, which saved us about 30 seconds. After upgrading both the hard drive and the RAM, we were able to get the computer to boot up in about 48 seconds, which is pretty impressive. Before we put this back together, as you guys can see, the hard drive is dangling a little bit because it's not a perfect fit. It's way too small to fit in here nicely. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put some 3M tape so that way it'll stick to the bottom, because all we have underneath is just an empty plate. So now that won't fall out anymore. Then we'll just put the plate back on. Now we just need to put the battery back in and this computer is good to go. Okay guys, let's talk about our final thoughts and conclusions that we drew from these two simple upgrades. Did we make the computer faster? Yes, by a lot. We cut down the time by over 1/3 to just boot up Windows. Will this compete with most mid-range computers today? Yes and no. We do have a lot more RAM and an SSD, but the processor is very old. As I said, 7 years plus old. So, and it's a dual core processor. So for that, at that time, it was again a cheap laptop that we got, and it is definitely a cheap laptop today. So will these changes make this laptop usable? Yes. Will these changes make this the fastest, best gaming laptop ever? No. What is the biggest bottleneck? The CPU. So what would be next if we wanted to upgrade this laptop some more? It's simple. We just upgrade the CPU and that would get a lot more life out of this laptop. What would I recommend? Maybe don't go 16 gigs of RAM, maybe just go 8, because I think the processor being a bottleneck will make 8 gigs of RAM more than sufficient. but we're gonna leave 16 gigs RAM because I'm actually gonna gift this PC. Okay, let's give my final thoughts. When should you upgrade? When should you buy new? If you're a college student and you have a PC that used to work well, or that used to be good, or that was performing decently, but it's just kind of old and kind of sluggish now, maybe these two upgrades will get a lot more life. If you bought a top-of-the-line PC with a really good processor, but it's kind of sluggish, let's say it had a hard disk drive, an HDD, and making that simple HDD to SSD swap was a huge improvement. So any upgrades like that would be more than enough. When should you upgrade RAM? Well, we had 2 1GB sticks in here before, and that was definitely way too slow even for the processor. So maybe upgrading the RAM then would have been sufficient. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. I hope if you took anything out of this, I hope you understood that you can buy an older or cheaper laptop and upgrade it to save yourself a couple of bucks rather than buying a brand new laptop. Newer laptops are a lot harder to upgrade than older laptops. This one was really easy. We just undid 2 bolts, or 2 screws I mean, and we had access to the RAM and the hard disk drive. Should you do this? If you have an old laptop lying around, definitely. Maybe spend 50 bucks on an SSD, because worst case scenario, let's say you choose not to use that old laptop, you can just put everything back together, but at least you learned how to upgrade a laptop. So that way in the future, when your current laptop becomes old, you can still upgrade it so that way it's still usable for a little bit longer. And worst case scenario, you just take that SSD, pop it in your gaming computer, and you have an extra storage space. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you smash that like button and comment down below what we should do for the next video.